Thank you, Ashley, Joe, and Rennie, and a special thank you to you, Baron Ryan. I know I said it 3 times to myself so I wouldn't forget. That doesn't bode well for the rest of the sermon, does it? Well, good morning and welcome to those of you who are joining us up online this morning, because we're going to begin a part 2 of our study that we began in the month of March. This time we're going to talk about the new book just been put out on the market the early part of March, The Universal Christ by Father Richard Rohr. Now, some of you may be saying, topic sounds kind of familiar to me. That's because we as a church have purchased the rights to rebroadcast the conference that was centered around this book. The conference actually ended last Sunday afternoon. And for 1 month, we have the rights to rebroadcast. And that's what we have been doing on Monday night, starting at 5 o'clock. From 5 to 5:30, bring a dish to share. We have fellowship. Starting at 5:30, then we show the guest speakers. And then on Tuesday, we show the same segments, and that starts at noon. So from noon to 12:30, we have a dish to share, and then we start looking at the excerpts, the guest speakers from the conference. Now, last week, we saw Father Richard Rohr. This week, don't miss it. Oh my gosh. John Dominic Crossan, my all-time hero favorite Bible historian, is going to be the center point of our viewing of this Monday and Tuesday. And Crossan has some wonderful, fascinating things. He was certainly the pioneer in the historical Jesus studies over these last some 50 years. So you really don't want to miss this segment because it's very good. But we're going to be looking at this book through the course of this month to kind of get an understanding, a broader understanding of the universal Christ. So let's segue back to March. We set the stage in March because in March we looked at the story of Paul, the apostle. We looked at him not from a biblical sense, reading all of the parts of the New Testament. Rather, we looked at him from a historical perspective, recognizing that Paul predated the Gospels, recognizing that Paul was a man who never met Jesus, and I cannot stress that enough, because if you don't get that, then the rest of this is not going to make sense at all. But Paul's version of Christianity was a mystical awareness of what he called the risen Lord. And this is the Christianity that becomes so embedded. You know, today we really can't pull them apart. So our understanding of Christianity has this woven piece of Paul all the way through. But I challenged you, and many of you took up the challenge, to read the New Testament historically and not in the historical chronology instead of the theological chronology, which put Paul's letters first. And many of you said, wow, that's different. That's really different. Because we begin to pull them apart a little bit and see that Paul's talking about Jesus. He's not talking about Jesus at all. Not the man, not the human being that walked along the face of the earth. And obviously that's why he came into conflict with the original disciples. Because the original disciples said, how can you say that? We were there. And he says, no, I've had a different experience. So it's this Paul thread that weaves itself through this understanding of the universal Christ. It is not something foreign to Christianity. It's not something Richard Rohr thought up overnight and said, I have this understanding of universal Christ. It actually is something that has been interwoven into Christianity from the very beginning and before. Also, I want you to know, it's been interwoven into unity. So this whole idea of the universal Christ is not foreign or strange to those of us who have been in unity for any length of time. This is what our co-founder, Charles Fillmore, would write about when he would call it the Christ mind. And so reading from the Revealing Word, which is our sort of one of our textbooks, here's what Fillmore had to say. The Christ, the incarnated principle of God-man, the perfect word or idea of God, which unfolds into the true man and is blessed with eternal life by measuring up to the divine standard. Christ is the divine man, Jesus is the name that represents an individual expression of the Christ idea. Christ existed long before Jesus. It is the Christ mind in Jesus that exclaimed, "And now, Father, glorify me with thine own self." Christ abides in each person as his potential perfection. Jesus Christ, the embodiment of all divine ideas, exists externally in the mind of being as the only begotten Son. Fillmore's a little wordy, I understand that, but I also want to make the point that this is not, again, a foreign concept. I pulled it out of a hat someplace, or Richard Rohr is just, it resonates with us in unity because that's what we've always believed and what we've always taught. There is an eternal principle. There is a divine idea, as Fillmore would call it. And this divine idea comes from the book of Genesis, chapter 1, where God said, "I created in my image and likeness the humanity, male and female, we were created." And this divine idea and this divine principle, whether you call it the Word, whether you call it the Logos, whether you call it the Christ, whether you call it Avatar, I don't care what you call it, but there is something that precedes and supersedes Jesus of Nazareth. Now, I'm going to say something that is going to be difficult for many of you to hear, but I'm going to ask you to kind of sit with it. I need for you to let go of Jesus. I need for you to let go of Jesus. Because as long as you hold on to Jesus as the one and only divine being, you will never be able to understand the divine potential in all of us. And I asked some people through our classes and stuff to give me some questions as they read through the book, as they saw the videos the other night. And that was the recurring theme. Well, Jesus has more than me. No, no, no. Jesus is a man who was born and died and lived in history, and that was the end of his human story. But Jesus came to teach us something. That's what we focus on in unity. We don't focus on the salvific message, Jesus died for our sins. We said, what did he come to teach us? What did we come to live by? And this is the thing that the universal Christ, when we begin to let go of Jesus, and folks, we hold it tight, I'm telling you. Because we get to the point where you go into some churches and you think, are you talking about God or Jesus? Who are you talking about? We've got to let it go. Now, I'm not saying we're not going to pick it back up, so before you run out and say there's a heretic preaching in that church, okay, hang on. Jesus is coming back, okay, in a couple of Sundays from now. But right now, I want you to just divorce it. Because until you see this divine principle and potential in everything, how can you see it in yourself? How can you see it in your fellow human? How can you see it in the earth and the sky? In the book, he starts talking about this principle of the universal Christ, the idea that God is in everything. You know, when I first got into unity, and this was, some years ago now, I met some people that said, "Oh, you go to that church that worships a rock." And I was like, "Worships a rock? What are you talking about? It worships a rock. I never heard of such a thing." And they said, "Well, you just think a rock is God." Now, hear me very clearly, and we also saw this on the video. That is a theological point of view called pantheism. Pantheism says that box is God, that piano is God, everything is God. That is not what we teach, and that is not what Richard Rohr is saying. We are talking about panentheism. Panentheism said God is in everything. Now, here's what's so interesting about this. See, that was some 30 years ago, before we had, a lot more science to back it up. But science is telling us the same thing. Energy, consciousness, flow, atoms, molecules, the black hole, it all is part of the one great vibration, the one great energy. There's not a separate energy living out here someplace. There's just one great vibration. And it is in every rock, in every ocean, in every bird, in the planets, in the stars, and things that we don't even know and see yet. And it is in us. What a powerful thought. See, God is in us. In us. God is in the things that we see around us. And the challenge that we have is to awaken first and foremost to our own connection with God. Because what happens is, what we are very versed at is all the things that are wrong with us. I can tell you, you don't even have to tell me about what I've done wrong, honey. I've got a big, stronger list than you do. But when I come to saying what's good about me, what's whole about me, what is the potential that is within me, what is my gifts and what is my talents, I go, I'm not that good. I'm not, Somebody says, you look nice today. This old thing. Somebody says, I really like the way you did. It was nothing. Really? It was an expression of your divine gifts. Who's going to give other gifts to you if it is not that which is within you? And to wake up and to wake into the awareness, these holy, sacred, shimmering moments that we talk about, when we see in the mirror, we see, oh my gosh, the light in my own eyes, the light I can see with. It's interesting in photography. When I first was starting taking lessons and stuff, they would always quote, what are you taking a picture of? And everybody'd say, well, a car, a duck, whatever. And they said, no, what are you taking a picture of? And we were like, what's the point? They said, you're only taking a picture of light. You are only taking a picture of light, because it is the light that makes you see anything at all. And so it is the light within us that helps us to see the divine potential in one another. This is not just for Jesus. That's what I'm trying to say. You've got to separate them out, and you've got to start claiming. See, it's easy when we say, well, it's all about Jesus, because then that negates our own gifts and talents. I remember as a child, I grew up in that theology, and I thought, well, I can't be as good as Jesus, so why bother? Why try? What's the point? The point is, I missed the point. The point is that divine life is in each of us and in all of us. And this is what we've come to explore. And this is what we've come to try to see within ourselves as we go about our everyday living. See, we're not going to have this momentary divine revelation, that God's coming down from the clouds and you, Marianne, and that kind of thing. That's not going to happen. But it's in the everyday moment when I'm, yesterday I was making dinner and I sort of missed and chopped a few things that shouldn't have been in the salad. But, I just kept right on going. And I thought, here's a moment, here's a God moment. Here's a God moment. Stop. Take a breath. Feel the presence of the holy. God is here in my suffering. God is here in my challenges. God is here in my creative ideas. Rather than poo-pooing all of that, I begin to embrace it and say, it is mine. It is mine. Thank you, God. Gratitude. I have these gifts. Then, from the perspective of my seeing me differently, then I can begin to see you differently. You see, we can only see beyond the appearance of things. Someone said, well, what about bad people? Bad people still have the Christ within them. There are no exceptions. There cannot be. There is only one vibration. There is only one presence, one power. We say it every Sunday. There's only one Christ principle vibrating, pulsating through every person. But what's the key? What's the difference? It's that awareness, right? People choose to not see it. People choose to make life choices that do not support the ongoing evolution of their Christ principles and their Christ nature and their Christ self. But the good news is, at any point in time, we can turn and we can say, that was old me. Now here's new me, and I'm going forward into new me. Why? Because I'm reaching into something that is bigger and broader and deeper and wider than myself. This idea of panentheism, it's in me, in every cell. And some months ago, we talked about how this incredible body of ours, 37 billion trillion cells strong, is a massive communication network. It's always talking to itself all the time. What is it saying? You are the beloved. You are love. You are life. You are whole. What else does it have to say? Think about it. What else does God have to say to you? You are the beloved, in whom I am well pleased. That's a powerful, powerful statement. And I hope it brings you to tears just as it does me, because it calls me up to a higher standard. It says, Marianne, wherever you've been in your life journey to this moment, honey, there's more to do, and there's more to be, and there's more to understand, and there's more to explore, and there's more, and I'm not necessarily talking about out in the big world. I'm talking about within myself. What is this connection? What is this divine union? And how does it express in and through my life? This is the challenge that we all have. Because once we get a handle on that, then we begin to see there are no bad people. There are the Christ. Yes, their light is very dim. Yes, people make very bad choices. Yes, people hurt other people. Yes, we hurt the planet. What makes us think that it's just other human beings? And this is what's, it's a natural progression of our understanding that I see the divine in me, I see the divine in you. Panentheism says, I see the divine in everything. Every ocean, every flower, every tree. And do we have a right to destroy those things? No, we do not. We do not have the right to destroy our own lives. We must live into a new awareness. We've got to fight with it. And I remember, truly, when I started doing historical Jesus studies, I struggled with this. So if some of you are sitting there going, I don't know about this, I'm really having a hard time putting Jesus off to the side and simply seeing him as just a man who walked through history, that's a struggle. It's a real struggle, and I know that for many of you, it may be a real kind of existential struggle. But I'm inviting you to struggle with it, because until you free Jesus from the universal Christ, you can't see the universal Christ in you. You only see it in Jesus. And this is the heart and essence of the message of the book. This Christ presence, long, long before Jesus, from the very foundation of the world. I love what Richard Rohr called it. He called it the blueprint. I like that. There's a blueprint for all of creation, a perfect pattern, a perfect form, as Charles Fillmore told us. That is the perfect tree. It is the perfect human. It is the perfect ocean. Are they in reality that way? No, they are not. Because they're evolving from the perfect pattern. So it is true of our lives too. So as we kind of engage in this universal Christ, I want you to remember several things. This is not outside of Christianity. This is part of what Paul was talking about. Number 2, it's part of our own history in unity to understand the Christ nature and the Christ mind, the universal Christ within us. And number 3, it's an invitation today, I really feel, and why I'm so very passionate about it, is that Roar is inviting us to take that old language, we in unity I'm speaking of, to take that old language and to break it open and to realize a new richness and a new implication of what it means in our own life. Our world is so divided, my friends. We're running around, just kind of lost and confused. And what Roar is saying is there's only one place we can get back to that place of oneness, to that place of centeredness, when I can know beyond all knowing that I am connected and I am the Christ presence. And that I can see in you that you are the Christ presence and you are connected. And when I can see it in me and in you, and then I can see it in the greater world. Let's give ourselves the chance. This holy season, it's coming up on Palm Sunday is next Sunday, Easter Sunday, and 2 weeks from now. Resurrection and new life. What are we seeing in all around us? New life. Where have those flowers been? Where have they been? Well, of course they've been in the dirt. Of course they've been down. Of course they've been under the ground, burying and breaking open the seed so that what can happen? So that they can flower. This is what I'm challenging you with as we go through this course of the book, and I invite you to be with us tomorrow night or Tuesday at noon to really grapple with that invitation that the universal Christ is universally in you. Thank you for joining me today, and God bless.